Today you'll meet a friend of mine named Eddie Capparucci. He's someone who is really an expert in addiction and sex addiction. He works with professional athletes, high-ranking CEOs, and people just like you and I. I think throughout the interview, you'll hear his heart that he just cares. There's some real emblems that are in the life of the sex addict. We couldn't get to all of them today, but we do get to a fair amount of them. And I think whether you're male or female, whether you are a spouse of a sex addict, or if you are a sex addict, or if you're wondering if maybe you are a sex addict, I think you'll love this time with Eddie. I know that you're going to hear his heart of compassion and kindness and just a willingness to reach out to those who are suffering, to bring healing, to bring peace, and to bring clarity. So with no further ado, meet my friend Eddie. I'm joined today by Eddie Capparucci, who's become a great friend. Eddie, thanks for being here today.
Samuel, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about doing this.
So, Eddie, I'm going to let you share a little bit about who you are, your credentials, but you are the author of a book called Going Deeper: How the Inner Child Impacts Your Sexual Addiction. You've got a few certifications. You work with normal folk like myself, but you also work with professional athletes and some VIP individuals. So why don't you take a couple of minutes and share with the audience who you are, what you do, and your credentials?
Yeah, let me take a step back with that first. First and foremost, counseling was not my career choice. I got into counseling through my faith. That was what that was about. But I was in the corporate world for 25 years, and I understand a lot about betraying, being betrayed. I was really a full-blown sex addict by the time I was like 16 years old. And I was heavy into pornography, but then even as I started dating, I found that I couldn't just date one girl. I had to have more. Um, and then finally I got married when I was about 23, and I thought, okay, this is it, it's gonna all settle down. And it didn't. And I was back having affairs again. And that happened for about 2 years until I got caught. And my wife, when that happened, said, you know what, let's see if we can try to work this out. I said, I go, I can't. I go, there's something wrong with me. There's something, I'm flawed somehow, and I don't know what that is. And I don't want to do this to you again. So I went back to my old ways, and then I met someone else. I said, okay, well, this maybe she's the one. And once again, it didn't happen. And I was married for 10 years, and again, being unfaithful during that time. And then after I got caught there, once again, she was like, let's see what we can do. And I said, no, I am really messed up, and I have no idea what's wrong with me. And that's when I went to start doing the work I needed to do to figure out why am I running? Why do I keep running away from, what am I running to and what am I running away from? And what I found out was it was due to a very severe attachment disorder that I had. I'm more of an avoidant attachment. I don't want to let people get very close. And I'm very fearful that, because I'm fearful that the people who love you, I had the worldview of the people who love you will hurt you. The people who love you will leave you. And that was based on the fact that my dad died when I was 5 and my mother had a nervous breakdown. And I got sent off to these relatives I didn't know for a year. And then we got brought back, and my mother had another nervous breakdown and got shipped out again to other relatives that I didn't know. And that hardwired me as a child.
Yeah.
In that regard. But anyway, to fast forward, so meanwhile, while I am just a raging sex addict, I also am a very successful corporate executive in the marketing and advertising world. And did that for about 25 years. And then finally, after I did my work and found out what was wrong with me, I met my current wife. And we've been together for 23 years. I'm happy to say that I've been faithful the whole 25. You shouldn't have to brag about that kind of stuff. Or 23, you shouldn't have to brag. But for me, it's been an accomplishment, but it hasn't been difficult because of the work that I've done. And I understand that. But after I got married, I had an opportunity to come here from Atlanta. I'm a Jersey boy. I had a chance to come here to Atlanta for a job, or at least I thought that was a job. And it wasn't. What it was an opportunity for me to come down and really start to understand what my faith was about. and to understand it was about a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that began a whole new journey for me. And I went through that for about 4 years. And finally, then God was like, hey, guess what? You're not doing corporate America anymore. I got something else for you. I'm like, no, that's fine. You give it to somebody else, not me.
Right.
And well, he gave it to me. And so fine. So I went back to school, got another master's degree, did all the state work, got my license, the national exam, the whole 9 yards. And I opened up a practice as a generalist. And I was just seeing everybody, people with depression and anxiety, and you just name it. And then all of a sudden, these guys start walking into my office that they look like me.
Mm.
They're dealing with sex problems and pornography. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what in the world is this? And that took me on a new journey to go and seek various certifications. As you mentioned, I have several certifications in the area of sexual addiction and pornography addiction, as well as affair recovery. And that is what my practice is today. I've been in practice now for almost 10 years. My wife actually came into the practice about 4 years ago, and she worked with women who have been betrayed and going through that. I did that the first 4 years on my own, also seeing both the men and women and dealing with that. And, it's just been amazing what has happened here. But it's just so great because what we're seeing is there's a real opportunity for people to learn, again, why do I do what I do? Because I really believe, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is the cry of many who struggle with addiction, whether it be pornography, whether it be strip clubs, massage parlors, all the different gamut of the men and women that I talk with. And I think that is such a key point. Why do I do this? Why do I keep having affairs? Why do I do what I know is holding my life loose, my career, my future, and I keep doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And I keep acting out. And it's true for males, it's true for females.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're going to talk in just a few minutes about some real character flaws and issues that you've identified that can really be emblems or markers of sex addiction. But when someone walks through your door, man or woman, and they say, Eddie, I can't stop doing this. Why do I do this? What are some of the initial thoughts that you give them?
Yeah, and Samuel, this goes back to the book about going deeper. The idea that it is childhood pain points. I believe it's childhood pain points that we endured when we were growing up as children, adolescents, and teenagers that still impact us today. And we're not aware of them. We've suppressed so many of them. And therefore, what I've done is I've taken the inner child concept and I said, this is the kid he had this storage unit of all our pain points that are going on. Right. And so therefore, if you feel a sense of rejection by somebody today, and maybe that's not really what they meant, but that's what you feel, he dives into that storage unit and he pulls out, the time when you went over to Bobby's house to see him and you knock on the door and Bobby's in there with 3 of your friends and you say, hey, what are you guys doing? He goes, we're just hanging out. Well, can I come in? No, my mom said we can't have anybody else. He slammed the door in your face. And you just go home, you got tears running down your face, you don't understand why. But the kid is correlating it to something just happened, which you didn't even close. But what it does is just start to change within you, your mood somewhat. And now all of a sudden, that inner child, he don't want to sit with that pain. He doesn't want to, and that's what we'll look at when we look at those 10 characteristics. He doesn't want to sit with that pain. Yeah. So he learned, all right, at some age to say, hey, you know what? How do you deal with emotional pain? Because nobody's teaching me how to do it. And being a child, not having a lot of worldly experiences, and being more emotional thinking than cognitive.
Right.
And being cognitive, he comes up with his solution. I won't think about it. And how did he not think about it? He distracts himself.
Yeah.
Too much television, too much food, too much fantasy. And I
Yeah.
don't mean sexual fantasy, I'm talking about other fantasy. And then you take that same defense mechanism and we bring it into our adult world, but it doesn't work anymore because what it does, it hinders our ability to have relationships. So therefore, in this book, what I've done is I identified 9 reasons why people abuse sex. Why do they do that? And for example, and I took them as children. There's the bored child, the unaffirmed child, the need for control kid, uh, the lack of affirmation child. So there's 9 of them, which go back to very pain points. And in using this concept, which I developed several years ago, my clients, they're looking at this now and they say, oh my gosh, that's me, that's me, that's me. This is what's really happening deep down inside. This is why I'm running away. Now, it's really important to understand this. These are not excuses.
Right.
These men and women, when they go out and they're engaged in activities they shouldn't be engaged in, they are still responsible for their actions.
Absolutely.
They need to own that. These are rationale just to help the individual stay one step ahead of their addiction. Because if I really know what the true emotional triggers are, okay, so now if I learn how to be mindful, which is a problem for most people who deal with this stuff, but if I do learn that, then as that trigger comes, ooh, my risk of acting out has just increased.
Yeah.
What do I do now with the tools that I've learned to be able to handle that?
So let's get into it because I want to really talk through. I don't know that we'll get to all 10, but you sent me one of your articles that talked about some true characteristics of a sex addict or a porn addict. And I thought that they were some great points to walk through. We'll watch our time and we'll see. And you're going to send me some information. And for the viewers, if we don't get to all 10, you can message me on any of the platforms and I'll send you the article that you can look through. You can also buy Eddie's book on Amazon or wherever you purchase books. So Eddie, talk about the first and maybe what you think might be one of the biggest kind of markers or struggles that dictate whether someone might be a sex addict or a porn addict.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about all this, Samuel, is that they tie together. They link together. They're all really important. But the one that I'll jump on right away is the aspect of why I think most people decide that they're going to run away and escape is they need to avoid emotional pain. Okay. They never had someone teach them when they were younger what to do with their hurtful emotions. That person, whoever their caregiver was, the parent was, they minimized it. They just brushed it off. They told them, just grow up. Or they weren't even there to help them. So as I said before, what's a child to do then? I have this pain and I don't know what to do with it. Nobody teaches them how to process and then self-soothe.
Yeah.
So they have to learn to escape because I'm not going to sit with it. But then again, as adults, we wind up doing the same thing. And some people don't escape into sex. Some people escape into TV. Some people escape into, alcohol, drugs, exercise. I mean, there's so many, internet, there's so many different escape, food.
Yeah.
It all depends on what crossed over at that period of time that brought a sense of comfort to you. And what happens in these situations is somewhere along the line, they stumble across sex and they discover, oh my gosh, I could not come across a better distraction in my life. And they're right, because not only does it distract, it also provides this high level of stimulation that is just so overwhelming for them in a good way. Is that, well, we think it's a good way.
Sure.
It's not, right? So that's one.
Because
the second, go ahead.
I think when it's so true, growing up the way I did with a lot of pain, I always looked for an escape. Most of the time was, it was adrenaline based with motocross and guns and things that produced that. And then my own affair over 15 years ago, there was so much pain inside of me. And then as it was interesting, as I started to move on in recovery with my wife, Samantha, and I, over the last few years, I've stumbled across some internal childhood trauma that I've had to really work through. And it's interesting, we don't ever arrive. We never hit this point where we're like, thank God I'm done with repair or recovery work. People ask me all the time, they say, Sam, you've said you've been in recovery for 15 years. Are you telling me it's going to be like this for 15 years? And I say to them, no, but I haven't arrived yet. And so I'm doing work. When we come to the point, I think you'll agree, and you can speak to this as you head into number 2, but when we come to the point where we say, I'm not doing any more work, I've arrived, I'm good, man, get ready, because pain is coming your way, you know?
Yes, you're going to crash and burn. To your point, like I said, I've been almost 20 years in recovery. Does that mean that, oh, we're like this, walking around like, oh my God? No, that's not it. We can go weeks, months without any sort of a, trigger happening sometime. But if we're not careful and we're not mindful of those emotional triggers, as well as being drained mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually,
yeah.
Anyone, the stars align and you could find yourself in trouble. Yeah. And that's why self-care is so critical.
Absolutely. I can't echo that enough, Eddie. So tell us number 2, so I'll shut up and get out of the way.
No, it's great. Number 2 is a kind of an interesting one. People wouldn't think of this. The individuals who get so caught up in the idea of abusing sex, they lack curiosity. Because again, what you're going to see with all 10 of these when you put them together is that these people don't know how to really do relationships. Because if they really knew how to do relationships, they're not out there breaking the hearts of the people who they love. Right? They're going to be able to go and have those in-depth conversations and talk it through and be able to be vulnerable and open with them. They can't do those things. So therefore, again, it's like running away. But lacking curiosity means that, it's part of the idea that you don't probe in a relationship. You do not show an interest in your partner enough, or about people in general. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a client yesterday. He told me, he goes, man, I really messed up this week. I go, what happened? He goes, my wife was coming back from her Bible study, and I had just gotten a bowl of ice cream, and I, said to her, as she walked in the door, I go, how was your Bible study? And she goes, she was really very good. I really like it. She goes, here, you want to sit down with me and go over the list of resources that we're using? And he goes, nah, and walks away. And he goes, she was so upset. I go, yeah. I go, actually, I'm upset right now. I mean, after all the work that we've done, what happened here? And he goes, I got so caught up in the ice cream. Okay, he wasn't mindful, but that curiosity should have been to be able to go and say, yes, I want to see that list. Hey, you know what? Which one do you think would be good for me to read? Do you think we should be doing any of these together? What made you pick this? See, now we're going deeper and deeper, and we're starting to build this connection, this true emotional bond, which is what's really lacking in those relationships where somebody usually runs out and has an affair.
And that's what I tell couples and individuals is that, John Gottman says the biggest kind of marker of a potential divorce is contempt. And what I say that after contempt also is one of the biggest markers of divorce is disconnection. You're in your world, I'm in my world. And the addict, in my opinion, kind of loves that to a certain extent because they don't have to really be vulnerable and engage and be present, right? They're kind of on autopilot. I do my job, I do this, I kind of go here, here, here. I don't want to engage. I don't want to be vulnerable because if I do, what happens inside of them, Eddie, if they're forced to do that?
Well, then what you have to do is you have to try to expose yourself. Okay, I got to be weak. I have to be vulnerable. And I can't do that. But in many cases, you can go back to some of Gottman's work also, it's the fact that they don't really even know what they feel.
Yeah.
I mean, they can tell you again if they're angry, if they're sad, if they're happy, or, that's about it. Or fearful. but they can't drill down to really tell you what it is. And
Yeah.
those guys, or men and women who do that, who can identify, it may be very difficult for them to share because they've been taught somewhere along the way that emotions are not healthy. Emotions are dangerous. I'm going to get into a lot of trouble if I do this. And then the final part of that is the idea that, if someone shares emotion with you, your anxiety increases. And why? Because it's like, I don't know what to do with this.
Mm.
So again, we go back to the idea of minimize. We go back to try to fix it, shut it down. It's
Yeah.
not really that important. Or,
Yeah.
oh, I got something to do.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. What's the next one?
Yeah. Well, the next one is just pretty much piggybacking on what we're saying. Struggle to connect. Okay. They struggle to really, truly bond. As children, they didn't have that relationship model in most cases where parents were able to demonstrate what are the essential components to a healthy relationship. There was little in the way of emotional nurturing going on in the home. So therefore, what do they learn? They learn about connecting from maybe television or friends. Now, can you imagine if they didn't have any friends? I mean, they're not learning much of anything there.
Right.
So connecting in a relationship, again, that requires an individual to be emotionally available. And for these folk, for these men and women, that's like a foreign language. They build their relationship based on physical intimacy and not emotional intimacy.
That's
And that is
exactly right.
not the way, that is not the design for relationship. A relationship should be built on, emotional intimacy, and then we sprinkle the physical in to
Right.
enforce it and to make it stronger.
You're doing great, Eddie. You're just kind of hitting these points. So keep going. I want to stay out of
Okay.
What's next?
So this one guy goes to the example you gave before. They're inwardly focused. Okay. They spend too much time in their own head.
Yeah.
When they were younger, and they still do today. The way I put it is like they're running through life with their head down, and they're just oblivious to everything else that's really going on around them, especially the want, needs, and desires of other people. Okay, they just are not in tune to what people want. So therefore, it always keeps coming back to them, about them, and spouses pick this up, and they say, it seems like everything we do or whatever's going on, it has to be to meet your needs.
Right.
And it's like, somebody would say, hey, you know what, walk in and say, oh, what a tough day I had. And their comment going to be, really, you should have lived my day. I mean, that was tough.
Yeah.
It's just something along those lines, and you can't. And this is the trait. This one is the one that usually develops in young kids when they get this impression that no one cares. There's nobody there. So they just go about life with their mind filled of fantasies and worries. And then they rarely are in the moment unless that moment is producing adrenaline.
Yeah.
If there's adrenaline going on, they're there. But other than that, they're not.
And I think that's so we get so self-absorbed as unfaithful, but then as addicts, there's such a self-absorption. It's just they've got this loop running. And we're all selfish. I mean, if there's a spectrum of selfishness, we're all selfish. I mean, that's one thing. But I've noticed when dealing with those who are addicts, male and female, they have this loop that it is so tough to break that loop. And so I'm so glad that you're talking about that, because that's a big concern for the betrayed spouses. And they wonder, and maybe speak to this, because we're not going to get to all 10 today. I can just tell you've got so much to give, and I appreciate your heart. And I'm going to have to send out this article a lot. But for the person that comes in, let's talk to the betrayed. The betrayed walks in and says, they are in this loop. It's always about them. And it's not just selfishness. It's like this self-absorption that I can't break. What do you tell that betrayed spouse?
I tell that betrayed spouse that person, your partner, lacks mindfulness. And the reason they lack mindfulness is we'll find out at some point when we start to go back and start to uncover what's at the roots here. And we're going to see, most likely, he grew up in an environment where there wasn't somebody who was sitting there and helping him or her be able to look around and explore, to be curious, to be out there. And you know what? When you talking about that, they're all like, "You're absolutely right. When did you meet your parents? Your
Wow.
kid, yeah, they just sit in front of the TV. They're zoned out. They don't do anything. They don't barely ever talk to each other." I go, yes, and that's where he or she learned that. They saw that, and so therefore there's no engagement of how we should. We learn to love. There was a book, How We Love,
Yeah.
Mylan and Kay Yurkovich. And in it, what they said was, we learn to love in our family of origin. So if my family of origin is eating dinner in front of a television
Right.
on snack trays, okay, I'm not going to probably be the best conversationalist in the world.
Yeah.
And that's part of what this is. I'm probably not going to be very curious about things. I may have interest in certain areas, but I'm just not curious about people.
Yeah. And that's
That goes against relationship, does it not, Sam?
absolutely. And it speaks to the fact, because I know the betrayed will think, okay, well then I'm going to help them, right? I'm going to try and be the one that helps them get aware and open up their eyes. And what I've learned is, man, you can support the unfaithful, and you can be there, and you can be by their side and really do work. But ultimately, it's the addict's work to do it. It ultimately has to be the addict. What drives me nuts, and I've had some very pointed conversations over the last, decade with people where they were like, my spouse won't help me and they won't keep me accountable or this and that. And I just go, buddy or ma'am, listen, that's your work. Your recovery is your work. No one can do it for you. No one can get healthy for you. And so I'm so glad that you spoke to that, because it's so vital that, like you said, the addict wakes up and goes, oh my gosh, that's exactly right. Right. With more revelation means more work that we have to do. Right.
Yes. As you're well aware of, and probably many people in your audience are, nobody's going to change until they get to the point where they say, I want to change.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I gave you the example of me. I could have maybe tried to change at 25. I didn't. I waited till I was almost 40.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another 15 years of hurting and causing, scorched earth behind me.
Right.
People have to be there. And everybody who walks into the office, they're not ready.
Yeah.
They're just not ready to go there. And learning how to get out of your own head, and I call it like that servant's heart. You need to learn to serve. But again, the protection is they're protecting themselves, because if I don't stay bunkered down like this and I go to look outward, nobody's going to care, because nobody cares about me.
Yeah. So
And that's when you have to go back to them, and you have to start saying, whoa, wait, time out.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Okay, that's the feeling that you have.
Right.
Now, go back to when you're younger. Okay, yeah, your parents who are absent, whatever. I got it.
Yeah.
We live in a new world today. What's reality? What's reality telling you? Well, I have a loving wife or husband, and yes, they've always been truthful, and they've always been good to me, and they've been faithful, and they've never given me any reason to think that they are, that they don't love me. I've been doing this because I'm just scared. I go, don't judge the emotion, judge the facts of things.
That's
but
good.
If you're not living here at this time, you're still living back there in a way, you're not going to be able to do that.
So, Eddie, you've had I just appreciate your heart, because I know we talk about therapist-induced trauma a lot through my videos. And man, I love your heart to be gracious. I love your heart. I've read some of your stuff. I've read your book as well. Man, your heart is never to shame, never to expose, never to just, pounce. And there's therapists. There just are. There's therapists, priests, rabbis, pastors, what have you, that just, man, they're so heavy-handed, and they feel like, man, everybody's a nail and I'm a hammer and I'm going to hammer them into health. And man, I hear that coming through, and I know my audience does as well. And they'll feel the same way as they get to know your information. We're coming to the end of this, but I want you to just give me one more thing. If you were to say, look, if the next best thing of your 10, and we'll put out that article when we're done, what would be the next thing that you would hone in on to really help those that are struggling? Either they're betrayed spouses of addicts, or they're an addict themselves.
Yeah, it is just continue to do the work. Don't give up. Yes, I know there are times it looks like it's hopeless and you feel helpless. This is probably the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life. But it's those who persevere, those who continue to look for ways to be able to say, how do I just get through today? Those are the people who, in the end, when they come out of all of this and they get into this new relationship, because again, as you well know, Sam, we're not sending you back to where you were. Okay, I know where you're going. You're going here. You're going somewhere new. And when they get there, and they're like that little baby who gets the taste of ice cream for the first time. Oh my gosh, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this? This is amazing. Why have you been keeping it from me for so long? And that's what they have. But it takes work. It takes time. It takes it's just energy, a lot of energy. And so for that, I would just say, just don't give up.
And so, to the betrayed spouse who's watching this, who is married to an addict, who finds it hard to believe that they could change, get healthy, experience breakthrough, experience transformation. I mean, you're seeing men and women walk into your office. I know your wife works with women as well. You're seeing people come into your practice. And I know that you are seeing change. I know that you are seeing transformation. If you could take 1 minute and speak to the betrayed spouse and give them your perspective. Are people really changing? Are you seeing people, grow and experience transformation? Because when you're betrayed, man, you get lost in the sea of hopelessness and despair. Nobody's, the problem is, I tell betrayeds, and I'll shut up in a minute, the people that get healed, they're not writing articles and videos all the time. They're not on Twitter. They're not on Instagram. It's the people that are still stuck sometimes that are the loudest. The healed individuals are not always the loudest. They're living their life and they're moving on down the road, but the betrayed get just bombarded with this hopelessness and despair. And so, man, take a minute from what you're seeing, Eddie, and encourage the betrayed about what you're seeing with transformation and healing.
Yeah, there is a great transformation that can happen, and you're absolutely right. We do I see women or men who've been betrayed also, and they're scared.
Yeah,
they're scared. Because it's like, first and foremost, why in the world? Again, see, the why question is very important for them too, to understand why. That's why we go back to that book. And that's part of the reason I wrote it for them also, so that they could understand it's not about you at all. It's something else. He or she came into the relationship with this problem. But to look beyond, okay, the key to all of this, when you start to see change that goes beyond just eliminating the bad sexual behavior, and you start to look at what we've been talking about today, and you start to see someone who is more mindful, who's less compulsive, who's outwardly focused, not inwardly focused, who seems to have more of an emotional IQ. When you start to see all those changes, then you could have greater hope in the fact, well, you know what? If he or she is changing here, then I probably can believe the fact that when they tell me, no, I'm not engaging in those behaviors anymore. But if they're just simply saying, I'm not engaging in those behaviors, and the rest of that is still there,
yeah,
then you have every reason to be waving that red flag, to be saying, how do I know this is it?
Yeah.
What's going on here? So again, you know what? Be diligent, keep your eyes open, and also make sure you put out there what it is you're looking for from the new guy or the new gal. What do I need that's going to make me feel comfortable, make me feel at ease? And then the key to test, do they deliver?
Yeah.
Because if they really care and they really love and they're getting better, they're going to do whatever they have to do to make you feel safe.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Eddie. And I just want to thank you for coming in. You've been a great guest. You've shared not just great information and some great emblems, but you've shared your heart. And it's a heart of compassion, a heart to give back, a heart to bring people out of the dungeon of just despair and agony that we've all been in. I mean, if you're part of my audience, you've been through it, you're going through it, and you know what it's like. So, Eddie, thanks for coming in. I wish you all the best, and thanks for being a great friend, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.